Today's webinar is about 5 insights for transform action. What are the key success factors for leaders today who are tasked with leading people to higher levels of effectiveness in conditions more challenging than ever before? And I don't know about you, but I know I find today's conditions extremely grueling at times, and trying to keep up with everything is a constant challenge, and there are more and more demands as conditions in the market changes. They're also incredibly interesting and times of opportunity, and so we have designed this webinar to provide a conversation on how we can help leaders and organizations rethink how they need to approach their skill set for being able to cope with these times. So there was a little bit of information about Xenergie just now. We are a company that specializes in transforming people and culture. We have a presence in a number of countries. Our headquarters is in Ireland. I'm based in the west of Ireland, and you can see a picture of the west of Ireland here on the screen here. So our headquarters is actually in the beautiful Kinvara, County Galway, which is a place where many of our clients come to retreat and to step back from their busy day jobs and look at their businesses and themselves in new ways. Bernard is based in the capital of Ireland, in Dublin, and we also have a growing presence around the world. We're doing a lot of business in Russia at the moment, in Ukraine. Very interesting times to be there. And we have a presence in the UK and in Amsterdam, and developing presence in the Middle East, India, Brazil, and the United States, amongst other places. So, we are your hosts for today. Bernard and myself are directors of the company. We have been working on our passion, which is helping leaders to transform for these times. We've been working on this for over a decade now. So our insights are based on our own experience of helping particularly senior management to cope with these times. And the position of CEO or senior manager can often be very, very lonely, in that you feel you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, but at the same time you're also subject to sometimes a lot of sort of projection about what's going on around things. So people are looking at you for the answers. So the questions that we hope, some of the questions that we hope to work on today are, what are the attributes of transformation leaders, and how do you create conditions where people can attain these attributes? So in other words, a lot of the opportunities for learning today are still about learning theory. You go and do a 1 or a 2-day training course on management skills. You're bombarded with a lot of theory, which often you just leave behind and do nothing with. So what we have learned over the years, and there are many people that are from this line of thought now, that it's really the application of the theory that matters. And this is why things like action learning and coaching are so important in that learning mix to make things happen. We're also going to look at why teams are so important to transformation. How can we get more leverage in organization culture change through working through teams? And why do change initiatives frequently fail to achieve their expectations?
Okay, thank you, Lorna. Just to quick comment, I've received a chat from one of the attendees here. Everyone is muted at the moment. You probably have noticed that. And we will be opening the floor. As soon as you raise your hand, you will be going live. So we will unmute you and give you the opportunity to go live. We want to make this as much as interactive as we can now. Okay, Lorna, over to you.
Okay. So let's just kind of gather ourselves around the context of what we're talking about now. When we're talking about the conditions, what are we talking about? We're talking about the degree of uncertainty, the forces of disruption and globalization, lots of changes in sort of regulatory affairs. All these things are buffeting the economy of every single country around the world. Nobody's really excluded, even the countries that are so-called sort of emerging and more wealthy than others perhaps at the moment. They're still subject to a lot of change, more change than they've seen in centuries too. There is a recognition that a lot of business growth in this century will come from new ventures and innovations. In the next decade, we're going to see more technological revolution than we've ever seen before. So we all have a vested interest in fostering an environment that helps businesses, and not just private businesses but public organisations too, to succeed and to grow and to create conditions where people can grow, because we need people to be able to operate and run these businesses. Businesses are nothing without people. So we're going to talk a lot about the importance of innovation here. This is not just about continuous improvement, but even established companies, not just startups, need a portfolio of innovation ideas right across the business that are propelled by a culture that can really navigate and see its way into the future. A lot of businesses today are incredibly reactive, and we will talk a little bit about what we see as the reactive addiction in companies, where people are so trained and so caught in the firefighting of the here and now, just dealing with what's on their plate right now, that there is little appetite or even skill to be able to work with what's coming down the line. So our first insight is that we experience everywhere a desperate desire to try and simplify the complex. And complexity happens not just when things are complicated, but there are multiple answers to one particular question, and that we're going into uncertain territory that has been unexplored before. A few decades ago, we used to be able to solve a lot of the pain that we experience in companies or problems by throwing more money at it. That money generally isn't there today for people to throw at problems, and so there is much more focus on being able to work things through and to use the resources that we have. So on the one hand, we've got conditions that we've never faced before, but on the other, we've got fewer resources than ever before. And so this is really causing us to think and be creative in how we see the problems ahead of us. This is massive change for people. It's a huge leap in mindset. One of the key problems that we come across on a daily basis is that the psychology of change is desperately misunderstood. And in that misunderstanding, it is often actually avoided, because the feeling and experience of this complexity and this uncertainty is that we want to simplify things. This is a natural human reaction, and it can be very, very frightening. So entering that complexity is a big challenge, whatever level you are in the organisation. One other reason why it's a challenge is that there's no language to converse about that stuff, and neither is there a time or a space usually to converse about it. It's not something that really can be conversed well enough in, say, a Monday morning operations meeting where there's a very fixed agenda. Things like, how are we working at things, how are we reviewing our work, how are we treating the stuff that's falling between the cracks, the conversations that we're avoiding. That stuff that sometimes happens in, at the water cooler in the office, sometimes it gets thrown into performance management conversations, but it's often dealt with in a very reactive or a fearful way, as if we're trying to remove the problem rather than to explore the real root of the problem. So it's like trying to take, aspirin to kill a pain, when actually we need to look more deeply aware that what that pain is about, and that it's not necessarily in the area where blame is being pointed. It's much more systemic than that. And so what happens in this desire to kind of keep things simple is that a lot of these cultural gridlocks prevail, taking the aspirin rather than looking at the real root cause, and we get caught in this reactive addiction. So I'm just sort of showing here a very typical behavioural gridlock loop. We call this a cultural gridlock, and what it is a reinforcing series of unconscious behaviours that keep a culture really caught in the current way of working, which is not working. So you can see here that if you look at the top right, that people in these conditions are feeling very, very overloaded and exhausted. And the thought of actually kind of deepening their reflexive capacity is actually quite difficult, because they're so busy being caught in the daily do. So what happens is they turn to what's in front of them on their plate, meetings to sort out other meetings and things getting taken offline, And in the background, there's a sort of burning platform happening that actually we're not attending to any of this in the way that we should be. We're putting things off, we're pushing them away. Perhaps somebody won't talk about it, perhaps the management won't talk about it, perhaps one person appears to be the blockage, but it's not being attended to. So what we end up doing is more of what we're already doing, but trying to do it faster and simpler. But in doing it faster and simpler, we're just keeping unresolved issues building up and trying to do that faster and simpler. And that then causes people to get very, very defensive. And in order to cope and survive in this experience, they tend to retreat into their silos. So they go back into their functions rather than kind of coming over the top and maybe reaching out to other functions where they might need to collaborate more. And part of that is that they may not have the skills to be able to talk in the language of another department or go outside of the box more. And so a lot of these important issues are missed. Productivity drops, people lose trust, and so the circle and the cycle continues. This example is one that we see time and time again. I think we have come up with this cultural gridlock with almost every client that we have begun working with in the last years. And so the company may say, yeah, but we want to change. How do we do this? And one of the things about change is that you have an aspiration of where you might want to be, or you want to kind of move to that place where it all feels better, that simpler place where we don't have to deal with all this stuff. But we're carrying a lot of cultural baggage with us. And when times are, relatively stress-free, we have time maybe to sit down and explore these things. And to maybe look at what that cultural baggage is. You've got a nice picture here of a nice calm walk in the park. That's not quite what conditions are like today, however. And so the traditional responses to change tend to be to focus on continuous improvement rather than, and so to oversimplify the issues. And they result in actions which appear to be fixing the issues, but are in fact distractions rather than tackling the work required, as I said earlier, and so they miss the mark. Because to address the real work involves going into a much more difficult, unknown, uncertain place, and the organisation has limited expertise in how to see itself in this way. But in the action of saying that they're managing change, or we're going to send people on a few courses to learn a few skills, there is an illusion of control. But the problem is that the external context has changed so much that we actually need new skills to be able to work with this. So what we're talking about here is not the walk in the park kind of change. What we're talking about is a real adaptive transformational challenge, such that the future may bear very little resemblance to what is happening today. The problem is that most people find the future very, very difficult to imagine. And so one skill is to be able to really study what's happening in that external context, to see what kind of redesign and upgrade may be required. The other thing about adaptive challenges is that all of the tension around the stuff, so all of the tension that was showing you in that previous cultural gridlock diagram, all of that is actually a really positive force. But most people try and push that away. They don't want to deal with it. And so the kind of skills that we need for adaptive transformation challenges are ones where leaders and facilitators have really solid stewardship, where they can lead people in learning, and not just sending people on training courses, but to bring learning into the everyday, to build learning interventions into the way that we are as a company, and to develop leaders and facilitators who are humane, humble, challenging, but to be challenging in a way that is respectful to people, that motivates people, but also to call things like accountability and responsibility, to call when things are not happening, and also to be able to call that at the most senior position if necessary. And so we need to inspire people in this process. It's not enough to call people on failure without being able to uplift and inspire them too. And so these are very special skills. We're calling for leaders who are facilitators and stewards, and there aren't enough people that can do this. In fact, there was research done by, I think it was CIPD, which is the UK's UK and Ireland organisation for human resources practitioners. But the CIPD found that the majority of leaders actually found that their top leaders and their middle managers were vastly underprepared for these adaptive challenges. And so their key priority over the next few years is to upgrade the skills of leadership to be able to deal with this. So the conditions that we're actually trying to work with are not the walk in the park. Continuous improvement change is not sufficient. We need to help people to be able to leave behind their cultural baggage, devise a view of the future by understanding exactly what these market conditions really are. And there is a phrase which is being used a lot at the moment. It was begun by the American military, VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. And these conditions, these sort of 4 words really sum up what people at all levels need to be able to work with, and particularly the senior level. So what we're saying is that trying to simplify things actually doesn't work. We need people who understand and have the courage to work with complexity, who know that a plan may fail to reach expectation because of the volatility of the environment, that we may need to change our plans halfway through. Therefore, there's a great degree of uncertainty. The job for life is probably gone, and there are numerous answers to problems and to questions. And to get there, we need to be able to help people to see things in different ways. So the challenge is that we also have to maintain what we're doing at the moment. We have to stay alive. We have to keep going. So maintaining current service, we've got to improve what we're doing, yes, but we've got to make that step leap to innovate. And this may require a lot of reconstruction in organisation design as well, particularly the way that things like how we conduct meetings, how we conduct learning. It's not enough just to send people out to training courses. We need to construct learning interventions inside the organisation. We need to teach everybody in the organisation how to learn and not to be afraid of learning. Transformation is also a very personal thing. So yes, you will have to take a look at yourself as a person. Who you are outside of work is equally as important who you are inside of the work, because how you bring yourself to work is crucial. And the more we see ourselves as part of a system, an interconnected system, and to recognise those interconnected systems, the better. This is far more complex for people to actually grasp. This is really challenging for people to grasp, but we've got to help people to get there.
Okay, Lorna, thank you for introducing the insight number 1. I think we're just going to make a pause now and wait for if you have any comments or questions before we start with insight number 2. Is there any comments, any questions, comments that folks want to come? So just please raise your hand, go into the chat function, the question function, and we will unmute you should you wish to be unmuted, or you can ask a question directly in the types section as we go into insight number 2 now. Any comments, questions, chat? We have more people joining us recently from abroad, so please don't hesitate. It could be early morning. We have people from Australia. No comments? Okay, Lorna, over back to you.
Excellent. Okay, so all of these things have to be worked on at the same time. New responses, innovation, great leap in mindset. So we need to allow that storm to be productive, and we need to take people together through that storm. And so there's a lot of avoidance about going through that storm. This diagram here comes from Ron Heifetz, who wrote a book called The Practice of Adaptive Leadership, and it's well known as a reference for about sort of adaptive leadership. What it talks about is that the more the uncertain the environment becomes, the higher the pressure, the higher the tension. And he talks of how when problems are dealt with in a technical way, that there is avoidance. So where you see the warning triangles, you can start to see, Bernard might show the highlighter, where that avoidance happens. So both where those triangles are. If you see the green band going across that chart, that green band represents the work of trying to keep groups of people riding the waves. As you see the orange squiggle there, imagine that those are waves of change, ups and downs of change, in trying to innovate, trying to take an organization through any kind of cultural change project, or even that could represent one person's week even going through those ups and downs. So rather than go into the work avoidance or even the behavioral avoidance, so when we're talking about the avoidance, we're now going into touching into the stuff where the challenge and the conflict is. We need mechanisms to be able to take people into and keep them in that green zone where they're able to cope with that level of tension. So that's what we mean by allowing the storm to be productive. So these are some of the skills that we need to teach people. Resilience, to be able to handle conflict, to be creative, to be adaptive, to improvise, to be able to dive deep and then rise up high, to take a helicopter view, to manage different polarities, to be much more honest and authentic in the way that they converse with each other, to be far more intuitive than ever before, strong communication, interpersonal skills, massive, massive self-awareness, and to become coaches and facilitators of learning. Then we need to help them interact with each other. So insight number 2 is all about how we use teams to leverage. I'm going to hand over to Bernard to this one. Bernard.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. You might look at the chat function then as I'm coming back on more. So as Lorna's saying, next slides, please, Lorna. We're going into teams, and perhaps one of the most important model that you guys know is the Katzenbach. Can have next slide, please, Lorna. Hello, Lorna. Yeah, is the journey to the high-performing teams. And I think the question, let's make this a little bit more interactive here. How many of you, first of all, would recognize this chart here? You can raise your hand if you have heard of the Katzenbach and Smith chart. So just click on your hand. Thank you, Carol. Who else? Thank you, John. Except the majority of you. So I kind of will go back briefly over this. Basically, what we're seeing is as you're moving into the team level, you're moving from working groups to high-performing teams. And in the middle, you have different stages, which will affect the team effectiveness and team performance. And that each of these stages has different characteristics in terms of behaviors, in terms of where they sit, where they are, and we tend to move along that chart as we work with our clients. But most of our clients, what we found is they think they're a team, but they're really a potential team or a pseudo team in here, and usually has a lot of impact. But in order to bring in the context that Lorna was describing, that journey to a high-performing team needs to be really clarified and worked through in there. Okay, Lorna, next slide.
I think the other thing to say about your teams provide a context for people to learn as well. People learn best in relationships. And so when the problem is when they're working as individuals on this is that their learning is disconnected. So the team provides that mirror, it provides that context about how they are, and through one team you can leverage other teams in the organization. So in terms of getting traction of impact through the organization, teamwork is far more effective than just working on an individual level. And so the shift from, say, one-to-one coaching to team coaching over the next few years is going to be significant. And if any cultural change project, organizations should be looking at connecting up teams and coaching pretty much every single team in the organization in this high-performing team model. Insight number 3. So, okay, great ideas, great theory, so what? How do we actually make this happen? So I showed the heartfelt diagram earlier about the challenge of making conflict productive and to keep people in that tension zone. The approach to this needs to be like taking an expedition, and very often what we see happening is that clients go very lightly into training interventions and all coaching interventions without doing anywhere near the amount of preparation or contracting that they need to do. So going on a journey of culture change or going on a team coaching journey is like going on an expedition. It is a journey. And there are particular stages and gates that are important, and if you don't understand these gates, the intervention will fail to achieve expectations. So, for example, the first one, this is a very typical U-curve of transformation, and I'm sure many of you would be familiar with things like the hero's journey, or the idea that when we undertake transformation change, there is a period where we have to sort of leave our ordinary reality behind and go really enter that tension zone. The first warning triangle points to the first gate to go through, and this is the extent to which people are able to have very honest conversations, the extent to which they are willing to be vulnerable, they're willing to admit that they don't have all the answers, they're willing to say what they really think, the willingness to actually look at themselves and say, I need to change, I need to do things differently. A lot of people are very fearful of going into that challenge zone. And also, they don't have the skills, they've never been taught to do that. The second tension point, the second gate, is all about leaving the past behind, the point at which we can really park previous baggage. And this is much more than letting stuff go. It's actually about significantly changing the way that we approach things, and to have got to that stage with enough of a tipping point of people to be able to release what we call the first movement of change. The first movement of change is the movement down the left-hand side of this curve. So you're looking at basically, I suppose, the left-hand half of this diagram down to the second triangle. That is one process alone. That in itself will take a team probably around 9 months to a year to achieve that. We see teams trying to do that in 3 days, or even 1 day, or 3 months maximum. This is a significant journey of understanding what the team is there to do, of taking on personal accountability, of understanding and taking on new skills, of coming together as a team, not just a group, be able to work across functions and diversity, and being able to really work on the real work at hand. It is a significant journey. The second movement is what we call across the dark night, which is across the bottom. And this is a very uncertain, vulnerable stage where you can't quite see what the future is. You've got sort of green shoots, you've got cracks of light coming through, but you're still working in the dark, and you utterly have to trust that you're heading in the right direction. So things don't appear to be going well. At that point, some teams will give up because they can't see the future, and they get afraid, and they get lost. So careful facilitation through these first 2 movements is incredibly important. The point of the third triangle is also a crucial point. Now, we may have got through the dark night, we may have got through tension, we may have learnt new skills, but we may think, hey, this is simple. We know where we're going now. We'll just build on this. But the skill of building and reinstitutionalizing new behaviors is a skill which is really not embedded in most organizations, and you need external help. You do need help from professional psychologists, organization development practitioners, people who understand this deep transformational change. And so the reason why we look to things like teamwork and team coaching to help with this is that it provides a really helpful container to be able to work with the challenges of innovation and to be able to prepare for this as an expedition. So, I'm going to move on one slide here. If you imagine that on an expedition, if you were travelling across the Arctic and you had to take, so let's say you're taking a boat across the Arctic, because that's the metaphor that we're using here, and you've never faced this before, you will have to face your fears. And across the Arctic, across the top of the North Pole, there is a passage that you can pass through in 2 weeks of the year. It's getting a little bit wider now because of the global warming. But to achieve this, it's like going through the eye of a needle. And this is exactly what the journey to a high-performing team is like, and team transformation. It's trying to get a group of people through the eye of a needle. Not everybody will make it. Not everybody is coachable, not everybody is fit to make it. There is a letting go. But a number of people will make it. And as they make it, they will leave their old self behind, because who and what they will become will be so significantly different and so significantly stronger that it will be a phenomenal experience for them. It is going on a journey. It's a personal journey, it's an organizational journey, it's a group and team journey. And the key to this is the extent to which people are able to embrace those VUCA conditions: ambiguity, uncertainty, velocity, all of those things, and develop their inner strength to work with that. This is deeply personal, and to be able to tap into their individual and future collective potential as well, and to see how the future is emerging. So you can't see the future right away with all of those. Some of the skills that are important in this challenge. So thinking about that, so that's great, there's lots of things that have begun to kind of teach people new skills in that journey. But imagine you're on that boat, taking your team and taking your organization through the Arctic to a new way of being. Perhaps you've got to deliver new products and services because your old ones are going to become invalid. Perhaps you need to completely innovate your products, the way that you produce your products and services. Perhaps you connect up with your organization. There are issues in the way that those functions operate together. A recent team that we coached, in fact, had never actually worked together as a team. They just happened to report to the same COO across a number of countries. They'd never met. But together they had to find massive efficiencies in order to be able to innovate the whole service delivery of their organization. For that was definitely like going through the Arctic for them and finding the eye of the needle. So what kind of boat do you need? It's not just about the people on the boat, and it's not just about how you're going to get through the ice, but what kind of boat do you need? So what kind of intervention is actually going to work? And so we need to see boat as a kind of container. How do we contain the work that needs to be done? Bernard, I'm going to hand back to you for this one.
Yeah, thank you, Lorna. As a curiosity, folks, the previous slide that Lorna was showing, we actually have a video on our YouTube channel, which you have the link there, and invite some of you. It's only like a 4 or 5 minute video, as one of our associates has actually gone around the North Arctic, around Russia, using this metaphor in here. Another comment I just wanted to make, again, logistics. Carol, John, Brita, you've kind of raised your hand early on when I ask a question. If you can click on it, and as you have a question, I will then unmute you. And there, but please don't forget to click on the little hand symbol so we think you don't have a question. Or if you still leave it up, then I'm assuming you do have a question. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Brita. Okay, so that was just previously in there. So again, folks, if you have comments, raise your hand, type in the questions or chat function in here. So we're moving to the Insight 4 out of the 5 insights that we've introduced at the beginning of this presentation here. And this is the notion of container. Who's heard of that word, container? Again, raise your hand. Is that something which is familiar for you? You have that definition here, creating the right sets of conditions. Are you familiar with that terminology? So this is a question, yes or no, raise your hand if you're not, or if you are, sorry. If you're not, if I don't have any hands, Noeline, you are, thank you. Okay, so a few of you obviously doing systemic work would be familiar with that, or coming from an OED, organizational developmental background, or organizational behavioral background. So this is about setting the right container, as we call it, to make that journey, as Lorna is saying. So it is about having the right conditions within an intervention. And here, there's a question mark. So let me go back. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Alan. Sorry. Yeah. No problem. And here, so it's really about having the right conditions, tuning in into the environment of your intervention with your client, and having the right, if we use that metaphor, food and safety equipment, the boat, the right motivation in there. But one of the tasks of the team coaches, for example, if we use a team intervention in there, is to having the right coaching presence to set these conditions in there in order to move forward. Okay, Lorna, over to you.
So the kinds of things that are important if you're going to go on a condition on a journey like this is, are you prepared for all scenarios? And this is where often we find that contracting with a client can fall down when people go into team coaching too simplistically. Having very robust agreements about how you will deal with difficult conditions is important. So if you're going to sail through the Arctic, what will happen if you get a leak in the boat? How will you maintain the boat when you don't actually have anyone on hand to help you? Have you got enough food for the journey? Have you got the right permits and permissions to actually do this work? So for example, have you got an understanding from the most senior person in the organisation that this work could at times be disruptive?
Okay, Lorna, sorry to interrupt you. Alan, do you have a question? I'm going to unmute you because I think you have your hand raised and a question here. And please come in. Alan, you are unmuted. You're live now.
Hi, Alan.
Hello, Alan? No? Okay, that was
No.
maybe a previous question,
Okay.
so I'm going to mute him back. Okay, over to you, Lorna.
Okay. So, these are very special conditions, and so, as I said, things can often get worse before they get better. So that needs to be very carefully contained. Having the right permits and permissions is not that simple. For example, Bernard mentioned that our colleague who had sailed across the route of Russia to the Arctic, it actually took them a year to get the permit to do that. And I can tell you that, for significant organisational change interventions, it can take us over a year sometimes to get the permit and permissions from the right person in senior enough in the organisation to do the work, because it does involve a lot of thinking through and how it's going to be approached in order for all things to be in line and placed. So this is a very important part, is the container building. Having an experienced crew, therefore, is crucial. This is not something that an experienced coach can kind of set off onto on their own. They need help in order to work on this. It's not something that the organisation can even do on their own without external help. Not just because they often don't have the right skills in the organisation, but also they can't see themselves because they're in it themselves. So you can't see the outside of the boat if you're actually on the boat yourself. You need an incredible degree of sort of resilience to deal with this as well. Now, I'm making that sound all very kind of scary, but what I'm saying is it is specialised work, it is complex. Yes, we need to teach more organisations to be able to work with this. So we need to have far more systemic practitioners who can work with this inside organisations. And that's partly why we're doing this webinar today, because we're passionate about this work. We see the need for it, we've seen how it works, and we want to help more people to understand that and to share that passion. So these are the kinds of things that make the boat robust. To have a clear structure and form to that contracting. What does that container look like? The right design to survive the prevailing conditions and cabin fevers. experienced sailors and mentors, and the strength. So just as you're building a boat, building the container for coaching work is equally important. So how does systemic team coaching work as a container? So just so in case we want to do a definition of what we actually mean by systemic coaching, it is a container that works over a period of time with a team, and we'll just show you how that works in practice in a moment, to work through both transformational change and innovation. So we're looking at things like team performance, but also innovation at the same time. And it can work for transforming products and companies and the culture of companies by tapping into the ecosystem. So we look not just at the team itself, but how that team exists within its system, how that team relates to the other parts of the organization, to customers, partners, other teams, other functions, other parts of the organization and its industry. It helps people to kind of connect together to be able to do the work. And teams need a very clear common purpose. Now you might think that an organisation has a very clear stated purpose, but the truth is that purpose is often really, really unclear and not meaningful for people. In fact, I remember once doing a coaching intervention with a group of people and sitting in the meeting room with them, on the wall was their statement of purpose. But when I asked the team what their purpose was, nobody could actually answer the question, despite the fact that it was actually on the wall in front of them. Of course, they were highly embarrassed when I pointed out that it was on the wall. But the point is here that purpose is something that needs to be really felt, and it takes a team a while to get there. So that discovery of the common purpose is as much a ritual and a process as it is a statement. It's not something that you tell people, it's something that people discover and find together. The container for this work, systemic coaching, can also help develop the skills for the VUCA world as well. And we do this by linking it to very practical work that needs to be done. So whether that is strategically rethinking and reimagining the business, or looking at how the parts connect together. So Bernard, I'm just going to ask you to run through. This is an very brief example of how a program might work, how that container might look.
Okay, thank you, Lorna, and I'm conscious of time, so we kind of need to wrap up now. So the way we work is basically, so first of all, we teach team coaches to do this. So we have a program which is accredited by the ICF, International Coach Federation, and recognized by the Association for Coaching. So the ICF will give you 70 plus CCEUs, and the AC, it's recognized for your same thing, your coaching certification in here. This is an example of running this with clients, basically. So that, the first stage is the diagnosis phase about building the container and the preparation, doing different interviews and looking at the strategic imperatives and introductory group meeting, etc., etc. Sorry, this is about building the container, then doing your diagnosis phase, and I was mentioning. Then you're going into the, going down the curve, as Lorna was saying, the U-curve, coaching and development phase, doing monthly team sessions, and obviously this is team coaching, so you're doing the one-to-ones and coaching the system as such, whether it's a group or a team, going into the team development plan, and then going the other way, going up the curve, and here, prototyping and institutionalizing. Yeah? Okay, Lorna, over to you for a wrap-up, another 5 minutes, and then we need to wrap up. Yeah.
We'll just quickly go on to insight 5. The final insight is that, what we've described is quite complex. There's many elements to it. Where do we start? Well, systemic thinking actually starts with you. To influence a system, you can begin by influencing how you see yourself as well. So one person is a system. One person has connections around it. And so rather than seeing this is something that you do with others, our offer to you is that this is something that you need to work with first yourself, to see how you can unblock change in the system around you, how you take up your role as a change leader, how you learn to reinvent yourself, how you learn to go through that dark night and that curve. Because unless you can do that as a change leader and a change facilitator, and have been through that yourself, you will not be able to facilitate others through that. And these are skills that we really need to help organisations to have inside them. So our offer to you is that you might consider to become a systemic team coach yourself. Xenergie does provide a diploma course, and if anybody's interested, we will send you information after this webinar. It is ICF accredited. It will take you a year or optionally 2 years to complete the course, and it will provide you with those skills that you need. Our program is run with international groups, so you will learn from people from all over the world. A lot of it is done online, and you will, I'm just showing you quickly what the Systemic Team Coach does here. Here are the modules of the program. So we will send this to you afterwards. I'm just going to summarize these insights for us now, and then we'll pause for questions. So to summarize, firstly, recognize that change is about transformation, not just continuous improvement. It requires an adaptive approach. Teamwork is the key to leverage of cultural change. Innovation is a journey for which you absolutely need to be prepared. You need the right container. You need to look at how you innovate with your ecosystem and your customers, and change starts with you. So we'll pause now for questions, if anybody wants to ask us questions now.
Thank you, Lorna. I know this is not an easy subject. We kind of cover it quite fast. I don't want to make it too salesy also in there. So Carol has raised her hand. Carol, I'm going to unmute you, and you're now live. Carol, you can now talk. Hello, Carol.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello from Australia. Hello from Australia.
Welcome.
Hi, Carol.
Yes, delightful to hear your views. I am just I work in the OD, and I'm executive coach in the public sector, mainly in England. And I'm fascinated to hear the new language, but still the deep understanding of the theoretical underpinning of what you do that I recall from many, many years of experience. And I'm just wondering, and I'm curious, why it is so difficult to get people to understand how long it takes to do these things. Because I hear innovation, I hear we all have to change, I hear new skills, I've reinvented myself 50,000 times, and I still wonder, what is it to gain entry into the understanding that these things take time, and human behavior is not robotic and cannot be on a keyboard to just change at a stroke. How do we do this?
Great comment.
That is a fantastic comment. Shall I give an answer first, Bernard? Or
Yeah, go ahead, Lorna.
Yeah. I think we're in really interesting times, because for the first time ever, the system is obviously failing all around us, and I'm using the system in a very big way. Public and private sector, everybody is hurting. People don't change because they want to; they change because they have to. And so, I suppose what we've noticed here is that people are starting to nod their heads and understand the time element, simply because they've been through the previous experiences of trying to fix things by, trying to do it in a short time, and they know it doesn't work. They're fed up with it. So, one of the theories that I learned in my learning journey back when I worked in psychotherapy for a while, and I think working with the clients on that level really helped me. But people really don't change until they get to a point where they're just hitting their head against a brick wall so much that it really, really hurts, and they have to do something. And that's what we see happening now. There is no more money, so it's hurting a lot. We need something that works, and the acceptance and the relief sometimes that they can admit they're not perfect. So it's a different time now, and that's making a difference, we believe. I think there are also more people that understand this and can speak more confidently about it in positions of authority. This is no longer just, you know, the language of people that wear, you know, sandals and have beards. You know, we've got very competent, experienced senior people around the world talking about this. And, you know what, being very honest and open about their own experiences in it. So it's so much more visible than ever before. Now, there's a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but change is happening and results are being seen because of this. But there's still a long way to go. But
I love your positivity, and I'm sure with people like yourself, the world can accept that we need to slow down in order to change.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah,
thank you, Carol.
Great comment in there. So I'm going to mute you back. Any other comments, folks? As I'm conscious that we're almost coming close to the timing here, and we had a few folks who already have left. Any comments? You will receive a recording of this with the slides that we've shown, and here there will be a follow-up email coming out basically in the next 48 hours. But we've got another 2-3 minutes. Is there any other comment from anyone, or, you know, did you like this? Did you not like this? Feedback, comments. Alan, do you have you see your hand going up and down? I don't know. I'm going to unmute you, or is this an error on your behalf? Alan, you're now live.
The joys of technology.
Yeah, you're now unmuted, Alan, and if you want to take off your question, you just click again on the question mark or the hand. Alan is still muted, so we'll mute him back. And his hand is going up and down. I don't know. Okay, let me look at the question mark, Alan. I'm going to mute you back. Okay.
Just still have so much fun about this technology. It's, you know, talk about getting used to change in new ways. You know, it's we do a lot of our work online, but
okay, I can't see the question, but if there's any other comments, you can shoot us an email. You have our contact details here. Email info@xenergie.com or www.xenergie.com is the website, and you have the telephone numbers here. So folks, it's now 11:55 GMT here, Dublin time. If there's no final comments, we wish you a fantastic day. We hope this was useful, and please keep in touch. We'll have a whole series of other webinars on the same topic in the next months to come until the end of the calendar year. There's a whole series coming up in there. So best of luck, good day, and thank you very much for assisting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.